Hey there, Yuris here, and welcome to the Community ROI podcast. Here, senior community experts tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how a community impacts business growth. By listening to these conversations, you'll get actionable steps on how to connect community goals with business goals to skyrocket business growth while still bringing extreme value to community members. And my guest is Richard Millington, the founder of Fever Community Consultancy, where he has helped to develop over 300 successful communities, including those for Apple, Google, Amazon, Autodesk, Lego, the United Nations, Novartis, etc. Trained over 1,000 community professionals through FeverBiz Community Management Academy, and the author of Buzzing Communities, The Indispensable Community, and Build Your Community books. So, welcome, Richard.
Hi, thank you for having me on this. It's great to be back.
Yeah, super happy to talk to you now about this professional stuff. So we had community life conversation about the personal stuff. So now let's dive deep.
That was one of the most interesting chats that I've had on any podcast ever. That was that was awesome.
Okay, let's have a little less interesting conversation. Okay, I'm kidding. It's also very
interesting
important
to me. I nerd out on this stuff, so I'm happy to.
So let's start. Let's start with the first question. So for you, what is the definition of a community goal?
Yeah, when I think of a community goal, I think probably the way most of your audience does, I would assume, is that we're thinking about a measurable outcome the community wants to achieve that helps the business. And that can be increasing product engagement, adoption, nurturing advocates. There's like the broader level, and then there's the more specific. Because I think when challenges arise, it's because the goal isn't specific enough. So, increasing call deflection, that's an okay goal. Engagement, loyalty, these are okay things as well. But what we really want to do with the clients we work with is get it more specific, like increase the newcomer retention rate by 15%, or reach a 45% deflection rate of support tickets. Something that, based on our experience, we know is achievable, but it's something that's really, really specific. I'm not so much a fan of things like increasing brand loyalty retention because it's kind of vague and it's hard to really pin down if you've achieved it or not. But when we get really specific, I think that's what matters. And then the other thing I'd add is that we distinguish between goals and objectives like this, where a goal is the outcome, and objective is what you need members to do to achieve that goal. So the goal is what you want, but the objective is what members have to do, and this is a very specific behavior. So let's say if the goal is to increase the newcomer retention rate by 15%, our objectives might be to get 50% of newcomers to join a newcomer group that we've set up for members in the community. It might be to ensure that 35% of newcomers visit the newcomer group at least 3 times in the first three months. It might be to reduce their time to value or create their first whatever it is, like within first 3 months, but very specific things that members need to do. And so we always combine the goals with the objectives. The goal is the outcome. The objectives are the specific things that members are going to do for that goal to be achieved.
How to understand what community goal to choose?
Sometimes it's easy. Like for the clients that we work with, there'll be like some senior person in marketing. They'll be like, the goal is this, and that's fine. We can work with that. That's great. That saves a lot of time. The only challenge then is kind of massaging that goal into a specific target that can be achieved, and just making sure it's very clear when that goal is being achieved or not, because I feel like it's easy for it to be a little bit vague and people to disagree. When people aren't sure what the goal should be, it's always kind of interesting because they've decided to do a community, but they're not sure why, which is fine. I mean, we can work with that too, but where we would approach that is with a stakeholder mapping exercise where we speak to the stakeholders, understand what their current knowledge of community is, understand what they need. Like, what are the metrics that matter most to them? We highlight what a community can achieve. And then usually we create a graph, which is very much on one side, like the importance of the goal, then how practical that goal is. And then whichever target achieves far up to the right, that's usually the best one to choose. But what works in theory and what works in practice are very different things. So what usually happens is that we go along that process, and we might not use the end outcome, But that process itself initiates the right kind of discussion and debate and brings the right people together to set those goals. And also the priority level of those goals. So it might be year one, we're going to do X, year 2 and 3, we're going to do X. When these things are being achieved, we're going to do X, and so on and so forth. But I think generally it's good to start with one goal and then expand quite quickly once you've gotten going.
Am I hearing it correctly that you kind of ask for what are their business goals and then trying to find how to phrase the community goal that helps to achieve that business goal?
I think the worst thing that any community professional can do is to sit down in like a room and be, the goal of this community is this, because then they're going to spend the rest of their time persuading everyone else that that goal is important. And it's a lot easier to begin with things that the people you work with already know are important and make that your goals. And so I'm very much in favor of figuring out what's important to the people that you work with and seeing how the community can deliver unique, useful value to them. And that unique thing is really important because it's not always easy to figure out what does a community do that isn't already being done by some function. You know, there are already people doing marketing. There's already people doing customer support. There's already people responsible for retention. What is the unique benefit of community? So for customer support, we know that in most companies, or at least a lot of like the tech companies that we often work with, they'll get so many tickets, and some of them are by people that are by all organizations of people that are paying for a premium level of service, and they expect like that personal one-to-one interaction. And the community is not great for them. And it's going to be some tickets that don't come from that group, but they require personal data to answer, and so a community isn't great for them. But community is fantastic for that 75% of lower value customers who have a lot of repetitive questions, and that's a more specific, unique value that a community can provide. And so we look for situations like that where community can provide unique, useful value that isn't being covered elsewhere. I think when a lot of projects don't go as planned, or they don't get the support that, or when community builders don't get the support that they think that they need, it's because they haven't articulated the unique, useful value enough. And that's, I think, where consultancies like ours and people themselves can really go through a process to get to the answer. Because it's not always easy to be very specific and to spread that knowledge and to really be clear about what is the unique value of community. Why is it so important now? What is it offering that the business isn't already doing?
How much time does it usually take from your experience to understand the unique value of the community?
There's a cliche with consultants that we always answer a question with, it depends. And this is one of those where it does depend. A couple of months. I mean, before the pandemic, it's interesting because I'd often visit a company in person, usually on like the West Coast of the USA, and we'd have like a couple of days together. We'd do a workshop and it'd be a lot faster. Mm-hmm. But now I think post-pandemic, it's actually a bit slower because it's harder to get meetings, harder to get people in the same room, not as many people working in the office. So it used to be a couple of weeks, but now 1 or 2 months, I would say, somewhere around that kind of level. But, you know, if like the senior stakeholder is on sabbatical at that time, that can be a disruption. But a couple of months to really bring people together, really make sure everyone is on board and connected and aligned. Yeah.
What is one goal of the community that you are working with of one of your clients at the moment, or maybe worked before, that inspires you personally the most?
I think my favorite goal is kind of one that almost violates what I was saying. It was, how much can I say? It was a very large organization whose goal was to build out the best ecosystem of partners and developers and support around their brand. Their goal wasn't so much about the return on investment in an immediate sense. It was just to be the best. And that's really interesting because as a consultant, we're like, okay, the first part of that is that we have to know what's the best. So then we develop like the benchmarks for what's good, what's bad. We benchmark how their competitors are doing at the moment. We highlight where the gaps are and what this organization can do better. And then we can go about implementing that. And so it's not a directly measurable thing in terms of the value. But once we have a means of measuring it by creating those benchmarks to begin with, it becomes a lot easier to build out everything else and the strategies and the plans to make sure that they are the best. And also put together the case of what it's going to cost, because you can't achieve the best unless you're willing to spend at least comparable with what they're spending. And having an understanding of that is really good. And it's also quite fun for me personally, because it's nice to work in a situation where you're really thinking about the customer, like, how do we make this the best experience as a customer? How do we make sure there's a group of developers eager to support and engage with them, a group of partners and consultants that they can go to for advice, a community that is more lively than any community out there, and really reverse engineering what that takes to make that happen. And so, yeah, that's probably the one that was most exciting. But I like that because it's different from a lot of the goals, and it comes from a place where, from a brand that already believes in community, that has been in community for a very long time, and you don't have to persuade them why customer support is important. And so, yeah, I think that's the one that's most inspiring to me. Like a lot of our work is great. You know, it's like call deflection or marketing or advocacy more and more, but being able to just build out the best possible engagement experience for customers, that's a lot of fun. That really is a lot of fun.
So how did you measure this being the best thing?
Yeah, so that's the first part of the challenge, and that's what I was saying before, where we put those benchmarks in place. So we create an index with the client as well of what's good, what's bad.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I feel like we've got the expertise from that wide angle lens of working with a lot of different organizations, and that criteria comes from speaking to members of the audience. What do they value? What's important? And it might be time to first response. It might be ease of finding the right developer at the right time. It might be, what was another one? The friendliness of the community as well. And then we can put together a criteria. I can't remember how many items it was, maybe 10 items or so. And then we can compare what the current companies are doing on each one of them. And there's always going to be a lot of subjectivity that creeps into this. You know, there's no way to do this in a completely objective way, but people can look at the scoring that we gave and they can compare it. So if they disagree, that's fine, but they can do it themselves. But we build out those benchmarks to begin with, and then we can show what the journey is going to look like from now to 18 months time and maybe 24 months time to where we want to go. And also for us, we usually don't work with organizations for years at a time. That's not the role of what consultancies like us do, is to make sure they make the right decisions very early on, put them on the right course, get them maybe 6 to 18 months down that line, where ideally they don't need us after that point. That's the goal of what we want to be doing.
And how did you connect this community goal of being the best with business goals of the company?
It's part of the broader, have to be careful here, because it's easy to identify the organization if I'm too specific. The organization has stated goals, part of their vision and mission, and it doesn't always connect to ROI. Like if you look at the business functions, like very few of them actually connect directly to return on investment, like HR and IT and legal. And so when they want to be the best, that is a big part of their mission. Yeah. And so it's not about measuring the return on investment or being the best. You just know that being the best is going to help. And it's kind of like generating a lot of testimonials or reviews for your business. You can try and measure it, but you just know it helps. It's kind of like being nice to your customers as well. You just know it's going to help. So for this example, no, we didn't measure it in that sense, but we measure it in a sense of you are now the best. You know, that's where you want to be. That's the journey that you wanted to go on. And it's very hard for others to argue against it. So it connects to the biggest mission of the organization, like the biggest goal of the organization.
What other community goals you are working on during your practice with clients?
It's funny, it's been evolving. Like for a long time, it was customer support, reducing support tickets. That was like the really big thing for a very long time. I think over the last couple of years, it's shifting more towards marketing goals. How does a community grow the business? How do you generate leads and qualified leads and How do you increase the conversion rate of those leads? How do you build awareness? How do you spread the right messages? So community is increasingly combined with those GTM goals. I think one of the ones that's coming up a lot is advocacy, and one of the ones that's fading a little is probably retention. But I would say most of our work, I'd say at the moment it's maybe 45% support. I don't know why 45. Just to say 50% support, maybe 35 to 40% marketing goals, and then you get like the 5 to 10% that is all manner of other things. Not ideation. Like there used to be a big thing about getting ideas and generating useful insights. That's not as big a thing as what it used to be. But yeah, maybe more brand loyalty and those kind of goals.
Is it like a community has to be focused on one goal, or maybe there are different goals that can run in parallel?
I think it depends on the maturity of the community. I think when you're starting out, it helps to have one goal, because every goal leads to a different set of behaviors that members have to do, and the scope of work increases exponentially. Like if you want members to do this thing, you need to do these activities, and if it's this thing, it's these activities. And so it's hard to do multiple things at once. It's really easy to focus on one goal and crush it. And even some really mature communities are like that. Like Microsoft Answers, who we're working with now, for example, they have a goal of reducing support costs. And it's just there. Like it's like they're very focused on it, and they optimize for that, and they zero in on that, and that's fantastic. You can work for that. Everyone is pretty much aligned. There's no confusion, and that's awesome. Other organizations, as they mature, or as their communities mature, they want to have multiple goals. So they might begin with support, but then they might want to achieve more marketing goals. How do we grow? How do we increase retention? How do we create unique groups for new customers to join to increase the trial completion rate? Like those kind of things. So there's a journey that tends to be quite common here, where you begin with one goal, then you expand over time.
What teams do you work with while building a community, and how does a community help reach their goals?
Most common teams, again, it's the same of what I was just saying. I think it was support for a long time. There's a lot of like customer support. Now I think it's probably more marketing, product as well. But usually, depending upon the scope of work, we all work with marketing, support, IT, legal to a certain extent, just to make sure we're not triggering any issues, PR teams if they're involved as well. And they get exactly what's aligned in their scope of work. So if it's support, then it's usually reducing support costs or getting to know their customers better and understanding what they need. If it's marketing, then it's a different approach, but it's like, how do we generate the right kinds of leads and prospects and awareness and messages that are being distributed there? How do we nurture an army of advocates for them to achieve their goals? Trying to think what else. Product, I mean, often they want an insight into what companies are actually doing, and that's really interesting to work with as well. What else? Success teams, I mean, creating a shared space for helping newcomers to learn best practices, resolve issues, connect them with experts. That comes up there a lot. Yeah, product as well, I think, is coming up more than perhaps I thought at first. Now that I think about it, identifying bugs, gauging the impact of what they're doing, soliciting ideas. Yeah. So it's a wide mixture of things, but it really depends on who the stakeholder is and what they want to achieve.
Give me please some of examples of how exactly do you do this? I mean, like, for example, if we take a customer support team, like deflection case that you create an database of knowledge that people can refer to, and also you encourage people to help each other solve their problems. So give me please more examples for other teams.
How other teams achieve their goals?
I mean, like how community can help exactly achieve their goals. Like what do you do as a community builder for that?
Well, let's focus on, let's say, four, like support, success, product, and marketing. I think those are like the common four. So I think if it's support, as we talked about, first we find out specifically from support what's the problem that they're trying to solve. And it might be that they get too many repetitive tickets from customers that are low average value, as I was saying. and that's costly, and it limits their value to support the high value customers that it limits their ability to support the high value customers they have. So in this situation, we would design a community and promote it specifically to the customers that they're trying to reach. We would make sure that when we got started, there were a good number of questions and answers that were in there. We'd make sure the community was in the flow of where people would visit before they contact a support channel for these customers. And then, especially now, working more and more with search and AI to when people search for an answer, they're more likely to find a community answer before contacting support. And also more and more focusing on escalation. So if we can't resolve an issue, how does that get escalated? And how do you keep all the context of where someone has already asked that question when you escalate it to somebody else? And more that's relying on things like chatbots and integration. And really the key challenge with these communities is making sure you have good, smart people that can answer questions from the community. How do you motivate them? How do you get people to do customer support for free, right? And that's usually because you're paying them in things that money can't buy. That sense of feeling, being helpful, being rewarded, like those kind of things good. If it's more marketing, the goals might be things like building awareness, identifying quality prospects, converting a higher percentage of marketing qualified leads. So community here would be things like building an army of advocates to drive growth. It might be hosting activities and events to identify prospects. It might be generating social proof like reviews and testimonials and case studies from the community to increase conversion. And the magic is always in the motivation. How do you get people to do these specific things? And that's where I think the skill of community really comes to the fore. Like, can you motivate people to do these things when you have no direct control over them? So for advocacy, it's very much about aligning what people want with the outcome. So the wrong way of doing it is telling everyone to come to your site and share their best advice. But if you can nurture advocates from the community to begin sharing their best ideas and content outside of the community, create their own blogs, YouTube channels, videos, Instagram accounts, that's a huge win. And that's how you can spread messages, and they benefit because they're building their own audience. There might be a way to leverage that in the future, or they might just enjoy doing that. So aligning that motivation is really key. If we think about success, we might have goals such as reducing the time to value. As I said before, community is very much about creating that shared space for newcomers to learn best practices, resolve issues, connect with experts, and also providing a place for veterans to get new use cases and examples. So again, here, there's a lot more heavy lifting where at first you want to be maybe interviewing your veterans, see how they're using the use cases, their product in unique ways, sharing and spreading those kinds of messages. So there's lots of opportunities there, but this is where you've got to do more of the heavy lifting. For newcomers, you often just want to guide them to the right place and deliver value as soon as possible in that place. Otherwise, they don't go there anymore. Product managers, a bit more of a broader mix. So therefore want to better understand who their customers are, where do they get stuck, what features to prioritize, what do their customers need? And communities here is great for identifying bugs a lot quicker, gauging the impact of those bugs, how it's impacting people, who it's impacting, understanding the sentiment of customers, soliciting the right opinions and ideas. And so for product, they usually have to avoid the ideation platforms that a lot of them have been doing and focus on using the community as kind of a focus group, but also looking at the unsolicited advice. So you can ask your customers, do you want this in red or blue? At the most basic example. But do you want this feature or this feature? You can look at what bugs are occurring, how many people are viewing those answers. So you get a lot of very useful insights a lot faster. But the goals change entirely what you do. Like a support community is very different from one that's about marketing, which is very different one that's to support the product. So you have to know the goal before you decide what you do. And I think a lot of people make mistakes here, at least in my opinion, where regardless of the goal, they do the same thing. But the goal changes the platform you use, the tactics you use, how you engage members, where you engage them. So I think that's a challenge that we need to get better at.
What I really hear that one of the main jobs of the community team and the community overall is to support other teams and connect them with each other. But you cannot, as a community builder, as a community manager, you cannot do it yourself. So I'm curious, how do you encourage people from other teams to work with the community teams to achieve their goals and community goals?
Yeah, I think this is where you see the value of senior community professionals emerge. Like, I think to some people, paying a community professional like 250 grand a year is insane. Like, there's generally people I've met that can't believe that some people get paid that in our field. But if they've got the ability to build those relationships, to bring people on board, to have those interpersonal skills, to have that gravitas, to have that ability to bring people around, that's more than worth it. That's more than worth what you're paying that person. And I think that's the real skill. The more senior you go, the more your interpersonal skills matter. You're not going to be in the community engaging people one to one. You're going to be focusing on the bigger things. And there is a strategy that goes along with that as well. And that strategy is, first, you don't want to tell people what to do. You go there to learn. Like, you go to this, it's kind of what we do with a lot of clients, where we don't tell teams what to do because they're just going to get annoyed. But we go there and say, hey, we just want to learn more about you, what you're working with, what's your current understanding of community. Do you want the community to support you? Would you be open to it? Just beginning from a place that's very safe and neutral to them, and then keeping them engaged in that process, keeping all the stakeholders engaged in that process as you move along. So you definitely helps. Like, you need the right data, you need the right story, but fundamentally, you got to go to those departments and learn, because people don't want to listen to you unless they feel you've listened to them. And I think that's such a critical skill and lesson. And I think it took me far too long to learn that lesson in my life. But just going there, listening to them, learning them, making sure they know that they were heard, and also embedding what they tell you into the plans and strategies that you're doing. Because if you just ignore it, that's kind of dumb. The other thing I would say is, like, you shouldn't really host a meeting until you know what the outcome of that meeting is going to be. One of the things we used to do quite early on was invite people to a meeting to decide like what to do. And what we realized is that can often lead to conflict, which isn't always bad, but the wrong kind of conflict in the wrong room. And it's a lot easier if people already have a good idea of what's going to happen, where you've spoken to each person individually about what you plan to do, so you can present your plan. It's more about how to execute that plan, rather than a lot of discussion about whether that's the right plan in the first place.
Talking about still working with the teams, so you can help them, and like we totally understand how it works, because when you talk to people, when you understand their problems, you're doing your best to help them, and most likely they will see it, they will feel it, they will go and say thank you to you, and maybe they will even advocate for community, in the perfect world. And usually it works sometimes. But how do you personally, as a community builder, as a community team, how do you personally bring visibility to the overall community impact on business internally?
I think the biggest mistake that I see is relying on data. I think there's a kind of mindset, especially amongst the more junior people in our space, perhaps, where if you just had the right data, you would prove the value of that community. And it sounds like it makes sense, but there's a big difference between convincing someone and persuading someone. And convincing someone is where you give them the information and they're convinced. But persuading someone is where you change their attitudes and their behavior. And persuading is emotional. It's always an emotive thing. And every single one of us, there are things where we look at the data, we know it makes sense, and we still don't do it. There's many people that don't eat the right way, exercise enough, don't do enough to support the planet, even though we're seeing the data, but we don't actually take those actions because we're not persuaded. And we're not persuaded because we found a way in our heads to justify not doing it. And so I think the key thing here is that you've got to make the data emotive. Like, data is a pillar to support the story you want to tell. And no one cares about a graph if they don't like you. Like honestly, like if you go to a meeting and you present a graph showing incredible return on investment, if they don't like you, they're not going to like the graph, and so they're going to find ways to pick it apart, and it's not going to work. So what works far better, and I think everyone knows this by now anyway, is to tell the right kind of story. Like to tell a story that makes sense, that is aligned with the worldview that people are in at the moment. So I remember like a few years ago, we worked with a SaaS company that had a really vibrant community of users. And there's one customer, I've forgotten the name, but let's say Sarah, was relatively new to the product, ran into an issue while setting up one of the features for her business. And she posted a question in the community forum and hoping to get help before her subscription renewal was up. And within minutes, like literally minutes, an experienced member of that community responded with detailed instructions and next steps on how to resolve that issue. Others chimed in as well with their own tips and suggesting additional ways to optimize the setup that she was deploying, because she had shared like the screenshots of what she was doing as well. And that was like a moment for us where actually people need to see the screenshots and the videos, and we can encourage a lot more of that. So in less than an hour, she had the solution that she needed. She had saved time. And we had this insight, which is we actually need to see more videos and screenshots so people can give even better answers. And what we also found out later on is that the customer support team were relying upon that answer to resolve the questions themselves. And here's where it gets really interesting. Like this story wasn't unique. We began like tracking a lot more of this and how many customers were resolving the issue through the community, through peer-to-peer support. And I think the data was something like a 25% reduction in churn was amongst these users who had engaged with the community compared with those that hadn't. And this is the kind of data that resonates. Like it's a data and it's a story. And if you're going to tell a story, it's got to defy the initial expectations a little. It's got to be true. And I think one of the really key things to do is to figure out what is the part of that story that resonates. You know, what's the story that's going to really resonate? And honestly, sometimes the story is, if you don't do this, your competitors are going to kick your ass. You know, your competitors are so far ahead of you in X, Y, and Z. Do you not want to be better than them? You know, like, and some people are going to get very fired up about that. Other times it's you want to do your best for your customers, but like you don't have this thing. Like this thing isn't at the same level as everything else. Why is it not? You know, we've got the data to prove it. We've got the data of the benefits that would accrue if you did these things. So you got to find that emotive hook. Like I really believe this. You got to find that emotive hook and not just think a graph is going to solve all your issues. Like, and this is why I think senior community professionals, and it's so sad to see so many of them looking for work just right now, are worth every single penny because they've got the ability to do this, to work with those departments, to understand what kind of story to tell to which person and how to make it actually stick, how to make it unique and visual to actually make it stick. And I think that's like the key to winning over departments, to getting things that spread. Yeah, I think that's the 100% key.
You know, a long time ago when I was working at the bank and I met project managers who were talking to clients and were going back to analysts and they were going back to developers, and you know, they keep this conversation going. I was thinking, oh, okay, so basically this is a person who can translate clients' needs into like a developer or analyst's language and to get the job done. And I feel like the community builder is exactly this person who understand different languages, who understand language of marketing, language of sales, language of support, also who knows how to listen to customers and knows how to make those, you know, people connect, make those languages work together. And then after all, also being a little bit of analyst and a great storyteller to come up with a story to the people. But you know, I feel like the community is not always a bright side. So there is also a dark side. And I'm curious, how do you talk about the challenges you face in the community?
Yeah, I think the most common one, I think there's a couple of common ones that arise most often. One is that our customers might say something bad about us in this community, and this is where like storytelling is great, because we've got great examples when that's happened and what the outcome of that was, where it actually turned out to be a positive thing. And so when a company says this, like we're worried that people are just going to say bad things about us in this very public place, I'm like, yes, I 100% want that to happen in our community, so we can show how good a response we can give to it. We can show how much that we care about this. We have an opportunity to turn this person around. And most importantly, if they're doing it in our community, they're not doing it on social media. They're not doing it in other places that are very public, very visible as well. They're doing it in a place where we have some degree of control, some degree of making sure this person has a great response. We get their data, we can respond to them, make sure that if they are at a risk of churn, we can identify that and have their customer account manager reach out. So this is one of the main benefits of having a community. People can say bad things and we can turn that around. What else comes up a lot? I'm trying to think. My brain's gone a bit blank. I think there's often a situation where a brand creates a community and then they don't have like the budget or support to continue supporting it for a long term. That happens quite often. I think another concern that comes up a lot is whether the information will be accurate. This is especially true in banking, healthcare, finance, a couple of fields where there's very specific laws about what you can say. And for public companies, often very concerned about hosting content that could lead customers astray. And this is a bigger challenge, which is why you don't see that many communities in the banking space. Healthcare as well is a bit of a different one, but you often find that they're very regulated. This is one of the ones where you can't say the right thing, you've got to do the right thing. And that often mean, I mean, you always have to do the like the right thing, but what you do matters a lot more than what you say. And this is where you have to build out a governance plan. You have to identify what the risks are, how you're going to respond to each of those risks, how you're going to escalate issues, and you have to be very, very on top of that before you can launch that kind of community. And you also have to learn the laws. Like you can't dismiss the concerns and be like, oh, that's not a big deal. If someone raises a concern, you have to be like, I'm going to make that my mission to make sure it's not a concern for you, because otherwise you're going to run into trouble. And often here might be things that you don't want to do, but to make it work, like pre-moderation of posts. I don't like it, but sometimes you have to do it. It could be more responsivity in who responds. Trying to think what else comes up. Sometimes there's an issue about top members being classified as employees. A slightly less of a risk of what it used to be, but very often, like, the goal of a community is to get people to work for points instead of a paycheck, and there's legal issues that are related to that. And so if you moderate a community the wrong way, I think AOL was an amazing example where their old moderators sued AOL for 12 million, I think. I don't remember the exact figure, but yeah, so you got to be a little bit careful around there. I think the other final thing that comes up in certain kinds of communities is abuse of the people that are running those communities. Like, what is the protections we're giving the person that's running the community? How do we make sure they're not identifiable, or if they are, that they are ready for that kind of visibility? If they're women, especially, like women, I hate it, but they often get like a lot of unwanted attention inside and outside of the community, and you need rules and process in place to deal with that, and a support place for that as well.
If something didn't work the way you planned in a community, how do you deliver really difficult news internally?
It depends exactly what I mean by didn't work. I mean, I think a successful community goes through iterations very often, and you should have the freedom to try things and explore things and test things and see what works and what didn't. But I think the most common example where it doesn't work is where an organization launches a community and it's a ghost town. Like, no one engages, no one participates because they've made strategic blunders that are difficult to recover from. And it's very hard to solve these unless you're willing to change the goals, change the audience, change the platform, or change the team that's running the community. And it's one of those four things. And the challenge with this question is that I don't want to brag, it doesn't happen to the clients that we work with, because that's part of what we do. Like, we make sure that they've got the right decisions in place. I think what does happen is not very often, but sometimes we're brought in to help an organization that has a community that's struggling. And so the challenge here is to be very honest. Like, if you keep doing what you're doing now, these are going to be the results. This is what it's going to cost you every single year, and adding that up and making it very, very clear. But if you want to make a change, and it's not going to be an easy change, it's not easy to change the goals, the audience, the platform, or the team. But this is what you're likely to achieve. This is the other organizations that have done it. So we focus on it more on a practical way. We've never worked with a community that has had a really serious issue, where something really bad has happened to members. It's always being publicity, a potential publicity issue, just things like that. But usually it's where something's not working, and how do we fix it and be honest? How do we have the attention of the person that can make the decision? That's part one. And that usually goes above the community team. And then how do we give them all the information to make that decision? So I don't like to be like, yeah, it's going really, really bad, because that doesn't help, right? I like to be like, we're not achieving the results that we want. These are the options. These are the pros and cons of this option. This is our recommendation, but it's your decision. Which option do you want to prefer? And I think that's a lot of what consultancy is guiding people to make the right decisions, presenting the right options, and letting people make an informed choice about what they want to do.
And I feel a little bit about every community builder as a consultant in some way, because basically they have to identify what's going wrong, what's going good, and they have to deliver those news and propose with some solution. The difference is also they kind of have to work on those things. So sometimes consultants don't have to work; they just present. But I feel like community builder also have to really, do what they tell about. And
I think. What I would say is that as a consultant, right, and I think it's important to make the distinction between the two. Like, we will never know a client's company as well as they do. Like, they've been working there, we haven't. Like, so we're never going to know. Where I think consultants add value is that wide angle lens. We know what's worked in a lot of different organizations, what works in multiple communities, what works in just one. And so what we should be able to do is bring those best practices to the clients that we work with, then collaborate with them to highlight what's the right way forward, what's the right way ahead. And yes, there's a lot of stakeholder engagement and support with that, and it's different for every organization. But I think the skill sets are a little different. And there's an overlap at times, but really I see our job is to help clients as far along that journey as possible, bring in expertise and insights that they don't have. Because we know there's a cliche about consultants as well, that they tell you what you already know. And it's good to be mindful of that. And it's important to be like, okay, what doesn't the client know? What are the insights and ideas that they don't have that they need to know? What are they missing? Because what's frustrating is a lot of companies keep making the same mistakes. They keep launching ghost towns. They keep launching communities on the wrong platforms. And so this is where consultants can really help, just making sure that everything you're doing is aligned with best practices. And I think that's where I see the difference between the two.
I would also add that, for example, everyone knows that that to be fit you have to exercise, but like it's not like everyone just go and exercise. For some reason, we have coaches who kind of like create programs, and we go through those to get the best results. And I feel like it's pretty much a very similar story. And Richard, I really wish to have the sky the limit, but time is the limit. So the final question. What is one small step to take right away for someone struggling with identifying their community ROI?
There's a whole subtopic of data and statistics and all those things. Like, there's a whole, you can go really deep into that level. But I think the most important thing to begin with, or let me name two. One, speak to your stakeholders, find out what they care about. That's one. Two, find out what data you have available. Like, honestly, you have to know what data is available, otherwise you can't measure anything at all. And once you know those two things, then you can follow our tools or just read around and find out what methodology makes sense to you. But speak to the stakeholders. Like, we do it as part of our course. We tell everyone to speak to their stakeholders. And it's mind-blowing to me when people are like, I had no idea that's what they thought. I was like, that's fantastic. But it's a shame that it needed a course for you to do that. But sometimes I think we just need the reminder to do those kind of things. The things that are obvious from the outside aren't always obvious when you're in the weeds and doing this kind of work every day. but speak to your stakeholders, have those conversations, even the difficult conversations, and then find out what data is available and you can have access to, because that's getting a lot harder today as well. So I think those two things is where I go.
And name 2 people who I should reach out to and talk about community ROI.
I think Brian. I mean, Brian is fantastic. Brian Oblinger is absolutely awesome. Who's doing fantastic work on ROI? Chris Detzel. I think a lot of his work is being really, really good. I like what he's doing. Yeah, so maybe those 2 are like good places to go.
Now, what is the best way to connect with you?
Richard@feedme.com, or find me on LinkedIn.
Got it, Richard. Always happy to talk to you. Thank you so much for this extremely valuable conversation and sharing your amazing experience so openly.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll have a chance to do it again at some point.
Yes, and see you in the community world. And thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions about how the community can help you reach and overcome your business goals faster, let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about it. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.